Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for the introduction. I'm going to be talking about a theme that's slightly different from what we've heard before, which has to do with Remy in the introductions called virtual actors. So it's not so much about scenography, but it's about the actor, really. And this whole thing started 3 years ago when I asked the question, can robots improvise? And I did some research on that, and I found out that musicians already do have digital agents that they regularly perform with on stages. Jazz musicians, they improvise on stages and they have a computer responding. So they have responsive machines on the stage already 20 years ago. So they have Voyager, they have the Jazz Continuator, they have Shimon, you might be aware of that. So I came to the next question, why don't we have something like this on the theater stage for actors? A virtual identity that we can improvise with. And after some research, I found out that there are, again, some people doing it already, which is amazing, I think. And both of them are part of our team, and unfortunately, they can't be here. Piotr Mirowski, this guy, wanted to be here, and he had to quit 2 weeks ago. He's a computer scientist at Google DeepMind in London, and he joined forces. In this picture, you can see that he's improvising with a small robot. The robot doesn't really do much, it's more a toy. But behind that is a machine learning system called ALEX, which stands for Artificial Language Experiment. And he joined forces with this guy, who's also part of our team, Corey Matthewson, who's based in Montreal now, also a computer scientist at DeepMind. And he started improvising with an AI he called Piggy, already 2016, which is really Cleverbot. You might be aware of Cleverbot. It's one of the famous online chatbots that you can talk to. He started having conversations on stage with Cleverbot, and he embodied Cleverbot through this projection on stage. They both joined forces, and they formed a group that's called Human Machine. And we got in contact 2 years ago, and we started projects staging AI. And this is going on, and I'm going to be talking about a series of experiments that we are doing, which are really small scale right now, and we're applying for funding for a bigger project. So it's going to be an artistic research project if we get the funding. So I'm talking about the experiments, which are smaller scale. This is the successor of Human Machine. It's Improbotics. It's a group that is internationally based in Sweden, London, Canada, Switzerland, and they perform on the stage the way you're seeing it. I forgot to say, you can see different embodiments. This is a robot, this is a projection, and this is kind of what we ended up with, not having any embodiment at all, but having in-ear monitoring systems. So one of the actors is receiving his or her lines from a chatbot. And as you can see, you have computer engineers on the stage, which is what Piotr calls the Kraftwerk effect, which is for the audience, there has to be something that really proves that this is happening live. And this is the way we do it. Actually, you only see guys typing in a computer. And you have the code projected at the back of the stage. So the audience believes that this is really happening in real time. And the staging, there were a couple of experiments, mostly around the Turing test. So it's a performative Turing test, which means there are scenes being played, one actor with an in-ear monitoring system, and the audience is asked to vote which one of the actors. You cannot see it because they both wear it. Which one receives the lines from the bot? So it's kind of a public Turing test. which doesn't work because the audience always guesses right, because the chatbots are not good enough for that. But for the audience, it's a thrill somehow. It's a way of staging it, and it's hard to stage AI. This is another successor. This is Almost Human, which is a full-length play that we created last year. It premiered in October. And it has 2 chatbots on the stage. Actually, it doesn't look like this beautiful picture. This is just advertisement. I'm wearing a microport, and it goes through language detection into the computer. The chatbot comes up with an output, and Katie, in this case, is delivering the lines of the computer. And we have a fiction which is one person is a human and another person is a robot. So we have a kind of a theatrical science fiction on the stage. We ask the audience, what kind of relationships will there be? What kind of jobs will they have in the future? So we're playing, so Katie is actually not pretending to be a human, but she's playing a robot. And the play is about the human is interacting with the robot, getting into trouble. He goes to his therapist, which is Eliza. So he's kind of ping-ponged between 2 robots. It's a future world with robots. And we're playing through the fiction of what kinds of relationships will evolve. So this is Almost Human. And we started to think, where are we? Oh, wait, what's this? Where are we now? And I think this kind of made it clear for us where we are at this moment of development. And I think it touches a lot of subjects that we had here already. There's this new media, new technology or practice or concept that is coming up in the society and technology. And when we start to explore it, we enter something we call the ludic field. It's an environment where we just play around with things. And it kind of has to be a playful spirit to do it. And often it's not very artistic what comes out, but it has to be a playing ground somehow. And it's really hard to organize the ludic field because you have to get together technicians and artists, and the technicians don't want to be treated like they just have to deliver something. They want to be treated like artists too, and they become artists when you treat them as artists. And you have to get them together and not lose the creative spirit of the encounter, which is really hard. We're working on it. Zurich University of the Arts has a space, a very big space now, which is called Immersive Arts Space, which is completely dedicated to the encounter of artists and technicians. It's a big thing. And we realized, okay, we were in the ludic field for almost 2 years, and then we wanted to make art. And then the next step is to get out of the ludic field again and do something that has artistic value in some way, which I here call remediatized art, because it has some conscience about the technology. It doesn't have to involve the technology at all. So we were at this point of the ludic field trying to get into remediatized art. And this is where we started to think, what are we creating? What kind of dialogues appear on the stage? And someone says, it sounds like a Dadaistic dialogue that we're coming up with. Strange. So we followed this line, and we looked at Dadaistic approaches towards machines, which surprisingly there are. The Dadaist movement was kind of almost obsessed with man and machine melting together, blending actually, which has reasons. One reason is World War I. Dada was in large parts a reaction to modernity and World War I, and the encounter with machinery, war machinery in that case, which and the army as a machine, which changed the perception of human and humanism. It was a large, it was a clash against humanism as it had been before. And also, humans came back from war in millions without limbs, as you can see here, and the limbs were substituted by prostheses. So somehow the whole thing of the wholeness of the individual broke down. The concept of the individual as indivisible broke down, and the concept of the man-machine blending came up. Today we would probably say cyborg. It's a cyborg theme, which is not quite correct, but today we would probably label it this way. This had a large impact on Dada art. This is a picture of Otto Dix, 45% fit for work, which clearly states this cyborg theme that was introduced by the war. Also, there were caricatures. This is a Raoul Hausmann, the Iron Hindenburg. Hindenburg was a famous German general, and this is displaying Hindenburg as a machine, and it says "Victory, hooray!" and "God be with us," and and up on the in the weapon there it says "blood." So it's a kind of uncovering the machinery, the non-human machinery of war and army, in a very blasphemistic way. The contemporaries really didn't like this kind of look at the army, the military. Also, the Dadaists looked at themselves as machines, or as half machines. This is George Gross. Dom marries her pedantic automaton George in 1920, where he displays himself as a machine, as a cyborg, you might say, with his then girlfriend and wife, Dom, who is in an erotic pose, and she's still human, but he's already turned into some kind of machine, or half machine. You can see, if you look at it closer, there are numbers being put in his head. There's a trumpet coming out of his mouth. There's some kind of computer in his chest, and his hand is trying to manipulate his machinery. So this is kind of how the Dadaists conceived of themselves. This is kind of general. This is Raoul Hausmann, a self-portrait of the Dada Soph, which is also the same theme. He's half human and he's half machine. And also he's kind of like a medicine experiment. He's opened up. So this is the kind of cyborg art that the Dadaist movement produced. But they didn't stop with paintings, and they also made performances. This is George Gross and John Hartfield with a sign that says, "Art is dead. Long live machine art, the machine art of Tatlins." And Tatlins was not a real person, it was an invention of George Gross. But it's a statement. It's a statement of using machines. The Dadaist movement, they used machines, they used printing machines a lot, and they used collage, the products of newspapers a lot. And they also did some performances with optophonetic poetry. I'm not going to show this because it takes too much time. This is a poem by Raoul Hausmann, which is just letters, and actually it's chance operations. This is just a tryout, so there's no meaning at all, which is one of the concepts of Dada. Try to destroy the meaning, or try to even destroy art and replace it with nothing. There's this Dadaistic practice, reducing the world to its basic units and then putting it together again in a meaningless way to avoid the mistakes that our culture is making. And this kind of has a resemblance to the digital age, because we are reducing the world into units and we're putting them together again. This you don't have to read. I'm going to read it for you. This is a quote by Hausmann. Why can't we paint pictures today like those of Botticelli, Michelangelo, Leonardo, or Tizian? Because human beings have completely changed in terms of their consciousness. This is the case not simply because we have the telephone, the airplane, the electric piano, and the escalator, but rather because these experiences have transformed our entire psychophysical condition. So the Dadaist movement doesn't put themselves as humans against machines, and this is very important, but they say we are already half machines, and the whole situation has changed. We cannot make sculptures like before. Humanism, as conceived in the Renaissance, has died in a way. This is some formula that I put up. The Dadaistic approach, formalistic art, which consists of all kinds of operations, also chance operations a lot, plus psychological art, results in cyborg art, or Dadaistic cyborg art. It's important that there is a strong psychological art aspect in it. 5 minutes only. Okay. I'm going to skip this. I'm going to skip this and this. Sorry for that. No, I want to talk about our project. 5 big minutes. Okay. I'm going to wrap up our excursus into Dadaistic approach. I kind of oppose two poles: immersive approach and then Dadaistic approach. And an immersive approach would be in hiding technology, celebrating humanity, mimicking human behavior, which is, for example, the case in the Bot or Not Turing test performances. In the immersive approach, the contributions would be mostly inside the frame of expectations, and it would be designed to pass the Turing test in case of chatbots. The Dadaistic approach would be kind of the opposite, displaying technology, celebrating the cyborg, exposing machine behavior, often outside the frame of expectations. I'm coming back to the frame of expectations in a second, and designed to inspire the cyborg in us. Again, it's not about machine and human in opposition, but it's about man, humans becoming half machines, talking to machines again. And I call this a cyborg interaction, which means the human becomes more aware of him or her already being mediatized, already being half machine. So now I'm coming to our project. We are conversing with a chatbot that we created, which is called JAN, which stands for Just Approximate Nearest Neighbor. And it has been programmed by Corey Matthewson, who I introduced already. It finds approximate nearest neighbors using Spotify's Annoy library over a contributed semantic embedding space with the platform TensorFlow, which means Jan creates, you give him a database of sentences or inputs, and it creates a 500 dimensional space, and when you give an input, it looks for the nearest neighbors. It places this input in this space, and it looks for the nearest neighbors of this input and gives these as an output. That's what Jan does. Actually, it's very simple in a way. The results vary a lot with the data you feed Jan. So we experimented with feeding Jan different data. You have to have large corpi. We used subtitles of films. We had around 700,000 lines of that. We used lines of pop songs. We had around 400,000 of that. We used Goethe. We had around only 1,300, which doesn't work. And we had the Bible, which has 300,000 lines, and it works. To understand what we were doing, we transferred a concept that comes from improvisational theater, which is the frame of expectations. When you have a contribution in improvisational theater, the whole audience and the other players build up a frame of expectations what might happen next. And you can, as an improviser, choose if you want to stay inside the frame of expectations, which usually is a good choice. Keith Johnson teaches you to stay inside the circle of expectations. This is what you learn for years. But it's also good to get out of the frame of expectations from time to time. And this somehow applies quite well to what Jan does, because it is creating nearest neighbors, and the nearest neighbors are something like a frame of expectation. And I'd like you to meet Jan live. I hope it works. Jan is here. There he is. Or she is. This is the interface of Jan. And I inserted a text this morning which says, Grenoble is a beautiful city. And Jan gives me 10 outputs, which are here. This city is so beautiful tonight. The city looks so nice. City of heartache city. It's a city of pride. It's a city of pride. Heartache city. It's a city of sin. You built this great, big, beautiful city. Exit the city. Toledo's got to be the silver city, and Detroit rocks like the Rio Grande. So Jan kind of detects that it's a city that we're talking about, and it's picking up statements about cities. And what we are doing now, we realize that some statements could be very good on stage, like exit the city would be interesting. If the partner just answers exit the city, I mean, this is dramatic. Or it's a city, it's city of heartache, it's nice. But for the computer, it's very hard to make this last step, this last choice, to find out which of the sentences is really good for the stage. If we get into the big project, this will be the first step we have to solve. And it's really hard, because the computer needs context knowledge, which they don't have. If you want, you can have a live interaction, but I think it's taking too much time. Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to the presentation. Meet Jan. So this is the setup for the stage. You have a chatbot in the back of the stage. You can either make it seen by the audience or you can hide it. We hide it. But the audience also gets an instruction what is happening. They need to know what is happening. And then we have the player, the actor with the in-ear monitoring, and we have a player with the microphone. If we have this, we can start building up experiments on the stage. We can vary the degree in which the machine matches the frame of expectations. Like we can take a very small database, and then the machine will almost always be off track. It will almost be surprising because they don't match. But we can also take a very large database or good database, and it will almost look like a human interaction. Almost. And the big thing for us in looking into Dada art was we don't have to wait until there's a perfect chatbot that will win the Turing test or the Lösel prize, because we don't even want it. We don't want a perfect machine mimicking a human. We want something else we can use with every stage of technology now. So what we really want is to provoke a cyborg interaction, something that will make people feel that they are in the machinery already. We don't want them to look from outside at machinery like you have in a fairground, like you have automatons or robots being presented in a fun fair. We've had this for 150 years already. machines being presented. No, we don't want that. We want something like that has a more reflective level to it, which makes it more critical. So we can play around with the frame of expectations. I think that might be a key for us. Readiness is everything. Hamlet, thank you for your attention.